go on to our next speaker, Dr. Somshila Murthy, who was introduced in all her grandeur, but she missed her introduction. So she is going to be dwelling on viral anterior uveitis, and let's hear from her.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chitra. Am I audible?
Yes.
All right, I'm just going to share my screen. So please let me know if it's visible in the full screen mode. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to turn off my video just because of the connectivity being not so great. Right. So good evening to everyone, and thank you so much, Dr. Chitra, having me in this wonderful webinar directed for the PG students. And it's just such a pleasure to be listening to all the grandmasters of uveitis in your group. I think you've got a beautiful group, excluding me. Everybody else is such experts. It's just a pleasure to be in it.
You are pushing now.
So I'm sticking to my favorite topic, which was, thanks to the previous speakers, a little covered. A few details were already covered. And I'm going to talk about the clinical PERS in viral anterior uveitis. Try to stick to the time and try to make sure I don't repeat too much of what was talked about. So I'm just going to go through, my plan would be to talk about the common viruses causing anterior uveitis, followed by some of the clinical features, not clinically features, but clinical features, then talk about the management principles, how to treat these disease, and maybe if we get, and then how to manage recalcitrant cases. So some special situations in terms of management. So a little bit about the background. I think that as when we were postgraduates, we used to be very interested in why things happen and how they happen. And what was fascinating to me to learn, and also I used to feel a little uneasy, is that the eye is a natural reservoir for viruses. In fact, the viruses can lay dormant for years, even lifelong, and they can shed intermittently. And so that is the reason why you see that so many patients, maybe more than 80% patients, have recurrent episodes despite antiviral therapy for even 3 to 6 months. So the response of the patient to the disease depends on the host factor, depends on the age of the patient and the prior disease that the patient might have. So although we do have pre-existing antibodies, but very often these antibodies are incapable of neutralizing the viruses. They might help us, but they might not completely eliminate the virus. Then the other problem with the anterior chamber is that we have the anterior chamber associated immune deviation. So the anterior chamber is immune protected in that way. So even if 1 or 2 viruses get in, the systemic immune system doesn't know that the virus is in, and therefore those viruses are protected and they can propagate, causing the disease. So the sum total, you see the destruction that we have, the inflammation that we have, is both due to the cytopathic effect directly of the virus and also due to the immune-mediated responses by the host. So now that we've understood what is the problem with viral anterior uveitis and why does it happen, why is it recurrent, let us go to some common viruses causing this disease. So you must know your enemies very well. So the top suspects that we have for viral anterior uveitis includes varicella zoster, herpes simplex virus, cytomegalovirus, also rubella virus, as was mentioned in Fuchs. Then there could be several rare viruses, and this list is sort of a very long list. I've not put all of it, but there are many viruses which either directly or, for example, in the case of chikungunya virus, can keep on persisting as recurrent inflammation in the patient's eye. So these are some of the list of viruses. So coming to the 3 commonest or the top 3 culprits that we have herpes simplex, varicella zoster, and cytomegalovirus. So how do you differentiate between these 3? Again, Sudarshan and some of the other speakers also mentioned a little bit, Bala in his wonderful talk also mentioned a little bit about these viruses. So when you talk about herpes simplex virus, we all know that this particular virus just loves the cornea. So these patients, whenever you have a patient presenting with recurrent keratitis, in which case you might see corneal scar, as what I'm trying to show in this picture is this diffuse anterior stromal opacification due to previous episode. Also, the patient would have hypoesthesia perhaps when you examine the sensations. There could be dendrites or the footprints of dendrites, or even disciform keratitis of the past, a previous episode of that. So the keratic precipitates at the time of uveitis could be small, or usually they'll be medium and fairly large. They could be diffusely distributed, as Sudarshan pointed out. and you would have a moderate AC reaction, but definitely an elevated intraocular pressure. Very often, these keratic precipitates are pigmented. And you can read this from this wonderful write-up by Kalpana in IJO. I think that is one of the best sort of review that I have read about the entire entity. So what about the next disease that you have? So the next disease you have is varicella zoster virus. It can, so you see zoster, herpes zoster ophthalmicus, we know it's a very classic presentation, but this can happen without herpes zoster ophthalmicus. So I'm talking about anterior uveitis without the herpes zoster ophthalmicus component. It can happen in immunocompromised or even immunocompetent patients. So here also you can see some corneal involvement in the terms of pseudodendrites, interstitial or nummular keratitis or old episodes of those. Again, there was quite a florid anterior chamber reaction. Sometimes even a hemorrhagic anterior chamber hypopyon can be noted in these cases. So I would say that in terms of severity, the AC reaction could be more than HSV. Once again, the IOP would be super high. So in the 40s or even more, leading to segmental iris atrophy. There would be classic trans illumination defects. And in a few patients, if the patient had previous zoster ophthalmicus, then you might have skin manifestation, but it is not necessary. So this is what you're expecting to see. For example, the segmental iris atrophy, patchy depigmentation in varicella zoster. The last culprit, maybe the rarer one, but definitely a culprit, is the cytomegalovirus. So what does this virus do? This is a little different from the herpes group, in which we have more of localized corneal edema. Hardly ever do you see nummular keratitis or previous scars. You don't see them. And instead you see coin-shaped or linear or even granulomatous keratic precipitates on the endothelium, as well as there's usually classically a very mild AC reaction, but a super high IOP. You can see in 40s or even 60s, and there would be reduced endothelial cell count. So the endothelial cells are distressed in these patients. And this is what you see in cytomegalovirus infection of the eye. The last entity, I had to bring it here, is Fuchs, which has already been described. It's a white eye uveitis, no posterior synechiae, classic stellate diffuse keratic precipitates, presence of cataract and vitreous opacities, presence of iris hypochromia, and they have an association with rubella virus. And many patients present to us and they're asymptomatic till they develop a sort of an intumescent cataract or even a cataract before this stage. So that was about the commonest culprits, the viruses that caused anterior uveitis. Now we're going to dwell into the therapy for these patients. So how do you treat these patients? So there are a couple of ways in which you can guide your therapy. That is, one is just by the clinical evaluation, the telltale signs that you have, as I pointed out for those previous viruses that I mentioned, or what would be perhaps a much more scientific way of doing it is do a PCR guided therapy. However, limitations of PCR is that not everybody would have access to a very good lab facility which would do a very robust kind of PCR for you. So in addition, there would be cases which, despite you're on the right track, but the patients don't respond, and then there would be special situations. So coming straight away to PCR guided therapy, people do keep asking about serology, but serology doesn't really have a very high role. When I say serology, I mean that when you test the serum for IgG and IgM antibodies for the particular virus. So maybe if IgM is completely negative, then it means that maybe this is not the disease we're looking at. Or if IgM is highly positive, then you can correlate it, but it is not adequate, it is not enough. From the aqueous, we can do Goldman-Whitmer coefficient, which means that we measure the intraocular antibody production as opposed to the serum antibody production. And this is usually positive 2 weeks after disease. The importance of the Goldman-Whitmer coefficient is that even in chronic disease, when you don't get live viruses, it remains positive, and positivity is more than 3. So the last and final one is the polymerase chain reaction, which is really the meat of the diagnostic test that you have. And we have either the qualitative PCR or the quantitative or the real-time PCR, which real-time PCR is better because its sensitivity is higher because it's an immunofluorescence way of testing it. And also you can quantify, so it gives you the viral load or the viral copies. So that's the reason why real-time PCR is most ideal for these particular patients. So now we're going to deep dive into the treatment of various viral entities that I just mentioned. And this is mostly for the postgraduates. It's everything is really mentioned in various articles and in your books, but just to revise that for you. So when it comes to HSV anti-uveitis, so the drug of choice could be tab acyclovir or tab valacyclovir. As you know, valacyclovir is a prodrug with better bioavailability, but the problem is it's more expensive. And in the dosage that you can use as listed here, which is 400 milligrams 5 times a day or 1000 milligrams 2 or even 3 times a day based on body weight for 3 weeks. And don't forget to do a baseline renal function test and repeat the same test every 6 months if you want to give, if we need to give prolonged therapy. In pediatric patients, the dose would be divided as per body weight. In very young children, so giving them oral medication won't help because they won't hold it down, and sometimes you might even have to give IV. So continue acyclovir or valacyclovir at the prophylactic dose for 3 or more likely 6 months till you don't see any signs of the disease. So what about topical therapy? So you do need to use topical steroids based on the amount of inflammation you see, either 4 times a day or 2 hourly. You can select prednisolone acetate and taper this slowly over the next few months, and you can switch to a lower dose, a low potent steroid in the subsequent months. Some do use topical NSAIDs. Sometimes I use it only in steroid responders, but otherwise there's less role for topical non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. And depending on the glaucoma that is going on for the patient, the glaucoma is damaged, you use anti-glaucoma medication, avoiding PG analogs. So whenever we want to take up the patient for surgery, such as cataract surgery, then you have to make sure that the patient is on prophylaxis. In case of drug resistance to acyclovir, then you might plan intravenous Foscarnet or Cidofovir in these cases. Coming to VZV, the treatment is pretty similar to what I discussed for HSV. Only thing is that the dose is conventionally twice, so it's 800 milligrams 5 times a day, or you can use famciclovir as well in these patients, although it's pretty expensive. Again, continue the therapy for at least 3 to 6 months, repeating the labs, and as well as we need to use topical steroids. The peculiarity for VZV is that it's very hard. If you switch off the topical steroids, the disease seems to come back. So you have to use a very low dose of topical steroid for a fairly long time, monitoring the intraocular pressures. So that's what I've mentioned here, and use cycloplegic for the first 3 weeks. Again, the anti-glaucoma medication as per the case. And again, you might want to use prophylaxis when you plan ocular surgery such as cataract. Coming to the last entity, that is CMV anti-uveitis. Here, acyclovir will not work. You need to use valganciclovir, which is 900 milligrams twice a day for maybe the first 4 to 6 weeks. It's a very expensive drug, so you're limited by its cost, followed by 450 milligrams twice a day for another 6 weeks or sometimes more. And also this drug has been used intravitreally to treat the patients as a weekly dose for 3 months. Also, because of its expense, we resort to using the topical version, which is ganciclovir gel. However, this gel is a very low potent gel, and you have to use, and we're not very sure whether it works and how good is its penetration. And there are also reports of using the ganciclovir implant. So some authors have used intravitreal ganciclovir initially, followed by oral valganciclovir. So that was it for my talk, which was covering viral anterior uveitis, especially its management. And I'll be very happy if there are any questions for me.
Thank you, Somshila. You had the 10 minutes, all of us so completely locked on to your presentation. I have one question for you. Keeping in view the recurrence of these viral uveitis cases, what is the incidence of glaucoma or the need to do a glaucoma surgery in these eyes, in your experience?
So fortunately, the need to do glaucoma surgery is extremely low. It depends on the duration of the disease. If the disease has been missed for several years, I would say 5 years or even more than that, those are the kind of patients where we have had to resort to anti-glaucoma surgery. So most of the patients, the glaucoma gets very well controlled once we start the antiviral therapy, and the residual pressure or whatever can be managed with medical therapy. So I would say it's extremely low.
Dr.
What is the use? Can I ask a question?
Yes, Dr.
What is the usual duration of treatment you give?
Hi, Dr. Ratinam. So nice to see you.
Hey, yeah.
So
Nice to see
depending on the disease, if it's HSV, then typically at least 6 months, perhaps even 1 year for HSV and VZV, because the drug is inexpensive, especially acyclovir. And that's the reason why we think we can afford to use it for a longer time. So I said 6 months at least, maybe 1 year. Whereas in the case of CMV, the main problem is the cost of the drug. So that's the reason why 3 months is about all the costs that people can afford if you're using oral therapy. And if the patient has reactivations, then I try to manage it with topical ganciclovir or something like that. Unless I'm monitoring the specular counts, and if I notice that there is change on the endothelial mosaic on the specular microscopy, then sometimes I convince the patient to take another round of oral valganciclovir, even in CMV. So the reason to cut short is because of the cost. Although it would be nice if we could repeat the PCR testing at the end of 3 months and then look at the viral copy and then decide on whether we need to continue or not. In a best case scenario, that's what we should be doing.
Madam, I have two quick questions. Somshila, madam, nice talk.
Hello, Srinivas. Thank you.
Yes, madam. One, Mr. Anil Kumar Verma from Himachal Pradesh. So his question is, how long the oral antiviral may be prescribed, and should the dose be tapered, and when to stop the oral antivirals?
So I just, Dr. Ratnam asked the same question. So my answer was for HSV and VZV, 6 months would be minimum, maybe even 1 year. So after the initial 3 to 6 weeks of full dose of antivirals, then we make it BID dose or the prophylactic dose. And beyond that, we don't taper really beyond that. That's about it, I think, for the question.
And when to start the topical steroids in case of HSV anterior uveitis with corneal involvement? Say there is a dendritic ulcer.
Right.
So we usually start topical steroids.
Yeah, very important not to start when you have the dendrite, and you can start topical acyclovir for the epithelial dendrite, and then it should heal within 2 to 3 weeks, and that's when you can add the steroids. So you'll have to wait for at least a couple of weeks, minimum 2
The
weeks.
role of oral steroids, because there's already an anterior uveitis there.
I think you can wait, because once you start the antivirals, most of the inflammation really goes down. So even waiting is good, but I mean, for me, starting oral steroids, for most patients, I try my best to avoid it and not use it.
Thank
you. Any other question before we go on to our next speaker? Thank you, Somshila. Be with us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chitra.
Okay.